Hey, what's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be doing a Season 6 Valor's End meta tier list. It's been a while since we've done a proper meta tier list, and so I figure it's time to give our tier list a bit of an update, especially because we've got quite an interesting and really crazy meta right now, where there is a lot, and I mean a lot of stuff that is actually pretty viable and strong right now. So yeah, before we get started, I do want to lay down a few ground rules for how this tier list works. First of all, obviously it's going to be a subjective tier list. Everyone's tier list is subjective, so if you disagree, that's fine. Smash that dislike button and then comment down below I am wrong. Because that always tends to happen with these tier lists. But no, seriously, try and keep it respectful with your criticism of the tier list. Obviously, some people are going to disagree. That's absolutely fine. That's why it's my tier list and not your tier list. But I will be coming at this tier list with the perspective of a high elo Masters player. I am consistently high elo Masters every time I play ranked, and the highest I peaked in Season 6 was top 50 Grandmasters. So I am obviously a very seasoned and experienced player at this game, and I'm going to be using that experience to guide me through this tier list, as well as I did look at some of the win rates and pick rates of these different characters to kind of help guide me along this list and make it a little bit more objective, but obviously it's still going to be subjective. Come on, it's a tier list. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from with this tier list. It's not necessarily a tier list made for like gold or silver meta, but you can still get a grasp of what's good right now based off of this tier list. Also, the rankings within the tiers do matter. So I'm ranking each class in the tier kind of separately, so I'm segregating them, right? We have damage up first, then flank, then frontline, then support. It doesn't mean that damage is better than support or anything like that. That is irrelevant. However, within each class, the rankings do matter. So if someone is farther to the left in one class, that means they're better. And if they're farther to the right, that means they're worse. So do pay attention to that ranking, but just know that they are, yes, separated by class. So that is very important to get clear before we start the tier list. And the last thing is, I'm doing a very simple tier list this time around in terms of the actual tiers. I've done some complicated tier lists in the past where I tried to inject nuance into the tiers and be like, oh, C tier is for the characters that are good but situational and blah blah blah. Apparently that was just too complicated, and people were flat out ignoring that or skipping right past it, and they would just, yell at me for something that, would have been answered if they just paid attention to the tier list. It was just a mess, so I'm not going to do that this time around. I'm just going to keep it more straightforward, less nuance, I guess, and we're just going to go with the classic S, A, B, C, D format. I have actually separated A into two tiers, A plus and A minus, because A was just too bloated. It's a really big tier. You'll see that later in the video. We're going to spend most of our time there. But yeah, with all that being said, heavy disclaimers and ground rules out of the way, let's go ahead and get straight into the video. Alright, so let's get started with the D tier. We're going to work our way up from the bottom to the top, and that means starting with support, where we have one support in D tier. And it breaks my heart. It really does. But Maldamba is our D tier support. And the reason for that is power creep. If you've been around my channel for any length of time, you know that I've been talking heavily about this topic and explaining why Damba is so bad right now, even though statistically he's at the highest power level he's ever been in terms of his numbers, right? Highest healing numbers, highest damage numbers, you guys know the spiel, right? So I won't bore you with repeating that again, because we've got a lot of champions to cover. But the point is, power creep has made it so that all the supports have just been buffed so far past Damba, that even though Damba's technically, perfectly capable right now, he still just gets completely outshined by every other support, and you can tell based on the win rate, he's not doing too good, man. He's got the worst support win rate by far, and it's quite sad to see, honestly, because I love him. He's so much fun. Up next, we have Rom. This is, yeah, pretty clear. Pretty straightforward, this one, why he's in D. He is, I think, the least picked character in ranked right now, besides maybe Kasumi or Seven or something. And yeah, he's just not very good. He gets outperformed by every tank. He has a lot of issues that make him really more of an asset to the enemy team than the team he's actually on, which is very, very frustrating. I've made a whole video about Rom. Go watch that if you want a detailed explanation about why Rom is he's not great right now. Anyways, next up, we move to the flank class. That's right, Kazumi's a flank. Don't forget that. She got a class change. And yeah, I mean, she's still the worst flank. She went from being the worst damage to the worst flank. But, to her credit, she is a lot better now than she was when she was a damage. I want to make that very, very clear. Just because she's the worst flank right now doesn't mean she's nearly as bad as she was last patch. And surprisingly, she actually has a few more matches in Diamond Plus ranked than 7 does. I couldn't believe it either when I saw it. She literally has a higher pick rate. That's crazy. That's absolutely mind-blowing. But yeah, no, she's still not super viable in a high-level competitive setting. She's got a long way to go, but I at least appreciate that Evil Mojo has more faith in Kasumi than I do, and they're actually trying to make her work. Next up, we have 7. I will admit, it is a bit cathartic putting him down here, but at the same time, I feel bad. Because despite me hating 7 and being the president of his hate club, I don't want him to be in D tier. I want him to be in B tier. I want most characters to be in B tier. That's the balanced tier, right? So it's a shame that they have gutted this character completely. They nerfed the range and made the range actually finally work, because apparently it was bugged for a while. And then on top of that, they absolutely gutted the damage of burst mode, which really, really hurt him. They gave him, honestly, probably an unnecessary nerf to, I believe it's the Knight, where they cut it in half, and that really hurt the viability of that. Overall, Tribunal Upgrades is hurting a lot because of the cooldown nerfs to that card, and also the range and damage of burst mode just being absolute crap now. And then automatic mode is his new best mode, but it has even worse range than burst mode, and he doesn't really have the survivability to actually get in close. He does still have that good mobility, but it's just really hard for him to actually do anything now. He's really, really awkward and frustrating, and I've had some 7 mains who previously were terrorizing me by stream sniping me. They're saying now they think 7 might be worse than Kasumi. I don't know if I would go that far, but, well, I'm going to take the word of the 7 mains, and I'm going to put him down in D, where I think they think he belongs now. So sad. Anyways, let's move on to the damage class before any more 7 mains dislike the video. We have Imani and Willow. Now, Imani is not even available in ranked right now. They actually disabled her, because she is causing games to crash right now with her ultimate, and people don't know why. So that's her first problem. Her second problem is, despite that bug, she's still got a million other bugs that make her kind of crap. She's got the frame rate issues that Shaolin and Atlas have, but she also just... Her ultimate is basically not an ability. Like, the dragon has fall off. It honestly gets her killed more than she actually gets killed with it, I feel like. And while she does have, a pretty decent burst, Inferno Cannon is... I have my problems with Inferno Cannon. And her movement ability is also very telegraphed and very easy to predict. It's not a very good movement ability for actually dodging. It's good at getting away, but that's about it. There are a lot of problems with Imani. I've made a video about her too recently, so there are going to be a lot of videos in the description for detailed explanations about any of these characters. But we've got like over 50 characters to cover still, so we're going to move on. Willow is in D tier because even though Dead Zone is very valuable, especially with supports being buffed and buffed and buffed and buffed and buffed like they have been in Season 6, she still doesn't really have a very savory kit apart from that. Her damage is very lackluster, and even though it ramps up with Blast Flower, it still means that for those first few shots, she's not really doing a lot of damage, and it makes her very easy to dive, with almost every flank in the game. And flanks are, on the whole, a lot stronger than damage champions, especially as we'll see later on in the list. And so she just doesn't really have a lot going for her. She can't even really outspam some of the spammier champions in this game, like Betty La Bamba or Dredge. So there's really just not a lot of reason to pick Willow right now, and she's just very easy to kill if you're going against her with almost any other character. So that's why she goes down in D tier alongside Imani. Alright, now let's move on to C tier, where up first we've got the character who is amazing in gold. Ceres. She is the new player-friendly support, and she is, the best support to play if you want someone easy to learn the support class with, but she really lacks value when it comes to those higher elo, higher skill settings. And again, I've got a video explaining why in detail. But the point is, she spends too long channeling her heal, she doesn't have a burst heal, and she really just struggles to get value compared to a lot of other supports who can do a lot of things simultaneously and just pump out a lot of healing and a lot of damage and have other ways to support their team too, like more crowd control, buffs, debuffs, etc. So that's why Ceres is in C tier. Up next we have Genos. Genos was S tier for a time in Season 6, but that time has long since passed, since he got a trifecta of nerfs to bring him back down to a more reasonable level, and now he's just kind of crap again. I mean, he can heal through walls, which is really good. Void Grip is pretty good, and he can spend a lot of time in third-person mode gathering intel for his team with his Stellar Wind, which is all pretty good stuff. And his ultimate can be valuable in some circumstances too, I'm not going to lie. But that healing is just, compared to some of the juggernauts of healing that we have now, it just doesn't cut it these days. And he doesn't provide enough apart from that to really justify picking him in lieu of a lot of the other supports this patch. So that's why he's back down in C tier. Next up, we have the tank class, where we have Terminus and Yaggaroth. Yaggaroth just confuses me. I don't get her, man. She's just such a weird, unorthodox tank. And if you look at her data right now, she's got very, very few picks. Her win rate isn't too hot. Some people can still make her work really well. They're wizards. I have no idea how they do it. But for most people, she ends up just kind of being a lump of mass that just gets shot a lot and maybe executes some people and maybe makes some space. I don't know. She's weird. I'm just going to put her in C tier and move on to Terminus, who is the only true melee character in this game, and as such, he really struggles to do damage compared to his other tank counterparts. His power siphon is amazing, no denying that, and the fact that he can have a lot of staying power in a fight by resurrecting himself with his ult is pretty good stuff, but his movement ability is infamously very buggy, and just not the best movement ability in the tank class, and again, his range really suffers. Yeah, you can get some good ranged burst if you have the enemies feed your power siphon, but with good trigger discipline, it becomes a lot harder to actually, get those power siphon charges up against a skillful player, right? Because skillful players just won't shoot the siphon as much. So it becomes kind of a rough cycle when you actually go against good players with Terminus, where you just struggle to do a lot. You struggle to get your Calamity charges up, you struggle to build power siphon charge back. It gets very rough. And his ultimate is also easily exploitable by Dredge and Droxus, anyone who can trap him, right? So not a super great tank, but not quite the D tier tank that is ROM. Anyways, moving on, we have Vora and Moji as our two C tier flanks. Vora is honestly acceptable, passable as a flank. She does a lot of stuff. She's a jack of all trades, but really master of none. She's got, decent range, decent mobility, decent survivability, decent damage. Like, she's got decent everything, but because she's decent at everything, she doesn't stand out at anything. And also, there are other flanks who are also pretty decent at a lot of things, and just do them better than Vora. That's why you don't see Vora picked up too much, but she's not quite D-tier trash. She's still capable if you're good at her. She's just, nowhere close to meta right now. And the same can arguably be said for Moji. On some maps like Jag Falls, she can actually pop off, especially if she's got, like a Torvald pocket or something like that. She's got very good damage, and she is a brawler flank. She's got, a lot of health, a lot of survivability with her cards. She's got the magic barrier, and all that is well and good. But, she does struggle against a lot of champions who can jiggle peek, who have better range, who are hit scans, who have better mobility, stuff like that. And so you don't see her very often. Some Moji mains, though, can make her work really well, and on certain maps, she isn't half bad. So she doesn't go in D tier, but she's certainly not going any higher than C. Next up, we've got 4 damage champions. Damage, in my opinion, is probably the weakest class in the game right now, with very few exceptions, and that's why we have so many damage champions down here in these lower tiers. Leon is, well, definitely past her prime. She doesn't have the super annoying auto-aim spam of Alacrity that she had in the past. Eminence isn't as good as it used to be, and it's still, in the year of our Lord, 2023, almost 2024, buggy. It doesn't do the damage sometimes. I don't know why. They really need to fix that talent. But she just doesn't really have a lot going for her right now. Her anti-flank role has been taken by Shaolin, and she does not have enough health nor enough damage to really survive a tank who pushes her. Off tanks just clobber her. It's not even fair. So she goes down in C tier, alongside Kinessa, who is terrible right now. She's only good on a handful of maps. And on those maps, admittedly, yeah, she's fine, she's passable, but she's really easy to dive. She doesn't do the same amount of damage as she used to. Her mines have kind of been neutered. She's not in a good spot right now. So sadly for Kinessa, she goes down into C tier alongside Cassie, who is High Elo's favorite comfort pick champion who actually kind of sucks. She's not doing super hot. She is, again, kind of a master of all trades, jack of all trades, master of none. In the sense that, she's got good bursts, she's got decent consistent pressure, she's got an okay movement ability and an okay ult, but she doesn't really shine at anything right now. She does still have, definitely good anti-DPS burst, right? She can burst down a squishy target. but she's not the most consistent. There are champions who do it better than her, and those champions who do it better than her, again, Shaolin, she actually loses against them directly too. So it's just kind of not a good spot for Cassie right now in the meta. She's not doing super hot. And then lastly, we get to Tiberius, who is the forgotten DPS, like I've said in a previous video. He's kind of like Cassie. Yeah. Except maybe a little bit better of an anti-tank and a little bit worse of an anti-DPS. But yeah, he's kind of meh. He's alright, but he's not great. I don't know. Let's just move on. Now, my friends, we get to the B tier. B for balanced. And we're only, by the end of this tier, about a third of the way through the characters in this game. There's so much strong stuff right now, man. Especially because of the whole situation where, crossplay is a thing now. You have characters that are meta on controller fighting against characters who are meta on keyboard, and it just creates basically 2 times the amount of good champions. It's insane. But anyways, let's start off with only 2 supports in B tier. We have Grok and we have Pip. Both of these are somewhat situational, and that's why they're in B tier. They're really strong in the right situation, but that situation is usually pretty rare. Grok is really good in double support and in beefy pirates comps with Totemic Ward, and he's also pretty good against Ying nowadays because of Maelstrom, really capitalizing off of her illusions. But he's still not, super strong. I've played a bit of damage Grok, and he still can kind of struggle to cut it versus, some of the flanks and DPS that we have in this game, even though he does succeed against Ying. So he's really just too situational, and that's why I can't justify putting him any higher than B. And then Pip is a really powerful heal bot, especially if you're good at him. He's one of the most skillful supports in the game. So Pip's potential can put him high up into A tier. But most people can't play him to that potential, and even then, controller meta, hit scans, aim assists, they all shred through Pip. It is so hard for Pip to exist in a meta where aim assist on PC is really strong, and then also hit scans are really strong at the same time, because his head just makes him so vulnerable. He takes a lot of damage that other supports simply don't take as frequently, and he's also pretty easy to dive unless he has his ultimate. And so Pip sadly goes into B tier, although I do really like him. He's a very, very fun support. Next up, we have 2 tanks in the B tier. We have Makoa and we have Inara. Quite the shocker seeing Inara down here. Inara got quite a lot of nerfs in the most recent Valor's End update, which compounded with a few slight nerfs from the previous updates. And so Inara is not feeling nearly as good as she was in the previous patch. Mother's Grace no longer gives her the increased healing, and she got damage reduction nerfs across the board to Earthen Guard, both on Mother's Grace and on the base ability. And so she is just not nearly as tanky as she used to be, and that was the big reason why you picked Inara, was she was basically unkillable. And now she's killable. So sadly, she has to go back down into B tier because she doesn't have a lot going for her outside of that. Her damage isn't super high, her ability to push enemies isn't super high, she's one of the only tanks without a movement ability, and yeah, her Treacherous Ground and her wall and her ultimate, all that is still, pretty nice, it's good stuff. It's just not, she just doesn't cut it anymore as a super S tier tank anymore because of those nerfs to her survivability, which again is the main reason why you pick her. So Inara goes down to B, and then Makoa's in B because, honestly, considering his win rate, he probably could go lower. Again, it's that hit scan, aim assist, controller PC meta, right? That just really sabotages Makoa because he has the biggest head hitbox in the game, and it's at center mass, and he's just a big round blob. He's so susceptible to damage. But that hook, though, that hook bumps him back up to B for me. That single ability, you have to respect so much during a match. You always have to be paying attention. Does Makoa have his hook? Because if you're playing a DPS and you get hooked, if they're paying attention, if you're against good players, which again, we're assuming you are because this is a Diamond Plus tier list, you're gonna die. Or you're gonna be forced to scram, get out of there, and whew, you're gonna be hurting. It is a super powerful ability. It always has been, and you always have to respect the hook. That's why I put him in B tier, even though the rest of him, could be put back in C. So, yeah, Makoa, oof, that hook, man. And it's a shame, because, yeah, hit scans do counter him hard. Against, projectiles, though, he suddenly becomes a lot more viable. So that's another reason why he goes in B. Next up, we've got our 2 balanced flanks. We have Maeve and we have Xin. The Xin is kind of like Vora in the sense that he's a jack of all trades, master of none, but he does it better. He is just a cockroach. He doesn't die. That's the main thing that sets him apart from Vora, and because of that, he's just good into everything. He's not gonna shine, he's not gonna stand out unless he's got a Torvald pocket or something, but he's just consistent, and I really like that consistency, and that consistency makes him a pretty average B-tier flank. And then Maeve is a flank who hasn't gotten a balance change in literally years. It's been like 3 years since the last major balance change. Like, she's a rock. She doesn't change at all. And for good reason. She's perfectly passable. She is a very competent flank, especially if you're good at her. If you're actually good at Maeve, she can get a lot of stuff done, and she can compete at the level of those higher tier flanks. But she doesn't go above and beyond. She's not insanely busted or anything. And so she just kind of sits in B tier. Perfectly respectable place for her to be, and she's great. If you enjoy playing her, pop off with her. She's honestly just fine. Now, we've got just a lot of damage champions. The damage champions are dominating these lower ranks. We have Dredge and Betty, both of whom are the quintessential spam champions. And these champions can easily be bumped up to A, or maybe even S if you're talking specifically about ice mines. They dominate on ice mines. Ice mines is in rotation right now. They're just what you pick there, man. They're so good. But on a lot of other maps, they aren't nearly as good. And while Betty especially can still be pretty annoying with her spam, she's also very susceptible to flanks and people just diving her, right? She only has explosive personality to defend herself against a diver, and that can be utilized very well by someone who knows what they're doing to actually defend herself, but she's just a lot more susceptible than some of the other damage champions we'll get to later. And in my opinion, Dredge is kind of just a worse Betty, so he goes beneath her in B tier. Then we've got Sati, who is all around a pretty solid damage champion. She's, again, kind of a jack of all trades with being the master of cover denial. She has a lot of cover denial in the form of her coin and her ultimate. And she can defend herself from flanks pretty well with her window of opportunity, or she can just spam out like 200k damage with heads or tails like Z1 Unknown has been doing in his matches. I don't think that's particularly the strongest playstyle, but in general with window of opportunity, she is a perfectly passable DPS. Then, at the top of B tier, we have Victor and Strix. Victor gets carried up here solely because of aim assist. That's literally it. Without aim assist, he's actually kind of trash, because he is super easy to dive. Probably one of the most diveable characters in Paladins Champions of the Realm. He is so easy to kill. But with aim assist, his damage becomes absurd. He has very low recoil. He has very high DPS. He can hit headshots very easily. And the grenade helps him out. So yeah, he just does a lot of damage when you plug in that roller. That's a common theme with a lot of characters that are hit scans these days. But yeah, Strix as well is the better of the two snipers, which is why I put him one tier above Kinessa, and people are actually able to make him work decently well due to that burst that he has on his Talon rifle. So yeah, he just, I guess goes into B tier, again, pretty easy to dive, just like Victor, but he can work at least a little bit better than Kinessa, I don't know. Let's just move on and talk about more interesting characters than Strix. Oh, that's better. If you didn't know, this is the last video for that I'm making for my vacation. I've literally recorded 6 videos prior to this one, and oh boy, my voice got very tired and dry there. So yeah, fun facts with Andrew. Anyways, let's move on and talk about the A- tier, which is a bit smaller than the B tier, but this is just one part of the A tier. The A tier in general is massive because there is so much viable stuff right now. So let's, I guess, just get started with Lilith and Ray. Ray is really a nice support to have for double support comps, which, as you know, are becoming more and more common these days. She has a lot of utility in the form of her ultimate generation, which she is the only support that provides that, so it's a very nice niche she's carved out for herself. But she also has a lot of damage reduction and damage immunity, as well as bringing buffs and debuffs to the table. She just has a lot of utility, and even though her healing isn't the most reliable, that's where you just pair her with a second support in double support, and all of a sudden, well, you're just popping off. So she's pretty darn good, and she goes in A-. Lilith as well is this is honestly I think the lowest she's been in a while, but you know, still A tier, so she's still doing pretty good. And she just has so much healing, it's ridiculous, and she's still able to do a lot of damage with her swarms while being very tanky herself. She has the health pool of literally a tank and really good self-sustain to boot, so she's very very strong ultimate as well. She has kind of moved down in the meta a little bit because she's kind of hard to play. And other supports have been buffed up a lot to kind of her level, but they're just easier to play, and so people pick them instead. And also, Lilith synergized really well with Inara and Nyx because those tanks don't really move, so they're very easy to heal with swarms, and those tanks are a little bit weaker now. So Lilith, yeah, I mean, she's still really good, but I guess has just kind of fallen a little bit out of favor because other supports are just easier to play and more consistent. But don't get it twisted. She's still really good. All right, now we've got 3 tanks in the A- tier alone. We have Ashe, Fernando, and Ruckus. All 3 of them are perfectly good tanks. Ashe and Ruckus are really good off tanks. Ashe, especially on ice mines, can really pop off because she really excels in those tight hallways, both with her damage and with her ultimate. But even without that, she still is able to make a lot of space with her shoulder bash, her crowd control, and of course her ultimate. The reason I don't put her as high as some of the other tanks in the game is because she does have really low DPS, and obviously Rezil really counters her. But apparently Ashe players can still just make her work. Honestly, I have a bit of a negative opinion about Ashe. I don't really like her that much, but I'm trying to be a bit more objective with my placement of her, and so I'm putting her a little bit higher than, honestly, I probably would have done if it was just my opinion alone and not trying to be at least a tad bit more objective about it. But yeah, A tier she goes. And then Ruckus, I played a little bit of Ruckus recently, and I was struggling to do as well with him as someone like a Zon, but he still is winning a lot of games right now, and he's still generally a very capable off-tank. He does a lot of damage, he has really good mobility, and his ultimate is the highest DP... Second highest DPS ultimate in the game now. It was the highest DPS ultimate in the game for like 6 years, and then Omen came out, and now technically his is higher. But Ruckus is a lot more consistent, so he's still got a really good ultimate. He's basically just a big flank, and when you pair him with another really good flank, you can pop off very easily with Ruckus, and so he's still very good. He goes in A tier, and then Fernando has been kind of bumped up by the downfall of Inara and the nerfs of Nyx. He hasn't really been changed that much, but he still is a very consistent damage dealer. He has the most consistent, weapon in the game to deal damage with. It's so easy to deal damage with. And he's got a very simple but effective kit. And then his ultimate is phenomenal. If this were an ultimate tier list, he'd be straight up an S. He has one of the best ultimates in the game. It keeps his entire team alive. They can't die. It's so good. It can counter every ultimate in the game. It can counter every push in the game. And it can allow Fernando's team to push up and actually get kills without having to worry about dying. It's so good. The ultimate is why you pick Fernando, and that alone, plus the fact that, compared to Inara, he's, a little bit better now, just relatively, pushes him up into A tier. Next up, we have just 2 flanks in A- tier. But get ready for A+ tier. Oh boy. We have Androxus and Talus. Both of them are perfectly capable, valid flanks. Androxus is more of a keyboard flank. Talus is more of a controller flank, but both of them do their jobs very well. Androxus is just the old reliable, good mobility, good reversal, good damage, and then also really fun flick shots, right? Everyone loves that about Androxus. And then Talus just absolutely pumps out so much damage on controller, while also having a really good teleporter that allows him to basically play safe. It's like an extended version of Eevee's wormhole, and because it's extended, it allows him to get away with a lot more stuff. So Talus is really good as well. And then for our DPS, we only have 2 in A-. We have Drogoz and we have Vivian. Now Drogoz, I have to say, is placed here with the caveat of you're picking him when you're not against counters, right? If you decide to pick Drogoz against Androxus, like an idiot, then he's D tier trash. D for Drogoz, right? But if you play Drogoz when you're only against soft counters or no counters at all, he's a menace. At that point, he goes up into S tier. So I kind of have to balance him out and put him into A tier, and his win rate reflects that. He's doing just fine right now. So Drogoz, pretty good, but there is that huge caveat. You gotta be careful where you pick this guy. And then Vivian, controller. Aim assist go brrr on PC with an easy to use hit scan LMG. Oh yeah. On top of that, she does have good utility. She has a shield, which can block a lot of damage for her, making her decently tanky. And she's also got sensor drones, which are really good at countering some of the other meta stuff right now. Shaolin. So those sensor drones can actually provide very good utility, especially if you really build for them and build for revealing the enemy team consistently. It can actually put a lot of pressure on them. So Vivian, pretty solid right now, especially if you plug in the roller. If you play on keyboard, not as much, not as good, but yeah, aim assist. Now, as we move on to A+ tier, I have to remind you that when we complain about aim assist, we're not talking about Timmy on his Xbox, okay? We're talking about PC aim assist. People who use PC aim assist on a rig that can get like 300 FPS, okay? Those gamers have an objective advantage over a lot of people when they play these hit scans, because they have basically no input delay, maximum frames per second, and their aim assist is wicked strong. That's who we're talking about. We're not talking about Timmy and his little Xbox, okay? Keep that in mind. Anyways. This is the biggest tier in the entire tier list, and it was going to be even bigger if I didn't separate it into A+ and A-. Oh man, there's so much strong stuff. Let's start off with the supports. So Io, Corvus, and Furia are all in A+. All of these have been banned pretty equally in terms of, ranked bans. Obviously, not casual bans. What am I saying? And yeah, all of them have gotten buffs or, in Furia's case, actually nerfs in recent patches, which have ended up putting them in the tier that they're at. Corvus has been seeing a lot of playtime, actually, after those buffs to his healing output. And you can also, I've seen some people kind of bring him out in a double support setting where he's pocketing flanks and stuff, and then the other support is just off doing their own thing, maybe doing some extra damage and stuff like that. But regardless, Corvus' pockets are just really, really nice, especially if you have the privilege of playing him with Torvald. Oh man, at that point it's just GG. So Corvus goes up into A. Surprisingly, honestly, I didn't expect these buffs to be that good, but the win rate reflects it, the ban rate reflects it. He's doing all right. And then Io, as well, is also pretty strong after her buffs. You could maybe make the justification for putting her a tier lower, but again, the ban rate, the pick rate, and the win rate, all those, they don't lie. She's doing pretty good right now. And the reason for that is because you can play Goddess Blessing now with improved healing output. You get lifelink, old lifelink, and Goddess Blessing at the same time with 150 healing on the ticks of healing. And then because of the Moonlight regeneration buffs, you can freely run the movement speed card on Moonlight now and give whichever teammate you're healing 15% damage reduction. What is it, 30% movement speed? And then over 1,000 healing per second, I'm pretty sure. Something like that. It's 1,000 something maths. It's a lot. That's pretty good. And even though it's a channeled heal like Ceres's, and a heal over time, she still has the added benefit of having Luna, which is a good bodyguard who can protect her and do extra damage, while Io is still channeling her heal. And so that does definitely help out. Although her ultimate is a bit trash, this is probably a hot take to put her in A+ to some people, but I'm going to put her there anyways, just because I can. And now for Furia. Furia got a massive nerf last patch. She's still A tier, man. Cherish was overpowered. Now it's kind of back to business as usual. It has a new AoE, which technically helps sometimes, although it's really weak in my opinion. And even without that, she's still really good. She's still got a good burst heal. She's still got some of the highest damage in the support class, and she still has the best ultimate in the game. That alone is enough to put her in A tier, just straight up. She's still banned a lot, picked a lot, and she still is winning a lot of games. Now, here's where all the tanks went. We've got Nyx, Azan, Torvald, Atlas, and Barrick, all in A+. Where do we even start? Nyx got nerfed, but she is, in my opinion, the better of the two tanks between Nyx and Inara now, just straight up. Because even though she got nerfed and took a hit to her survivability, she still does a lot of damage and is able to put a lot more pressure on the enemy team than Inara is, in my opinion. Her slow You know, she has a slow like Inara, but her slow is ranged, so she's able to get a lot more value out of that, and it actually comes with a bit of a burst of damage too, which is pretty nice. She's got that consistent AoE poison that is constantly putting pressure on the enemies, making it so that Nyx basically has a free reveal on them, and they can't heal out of combat. And she also does really good damage with her punches. She is still very tanky too. Even though the cooldowns took a hit, she's still able to sustain a lot of damage with her abilities, and in general, she's just a really good tank. Next up, we have Azan, one of the best off tanks in the game. He's able to produce so much space through the fact that he has passive damage reduction, one of the best movement abilities in the tank class, really good self-sustain, and also he's got his walls if he takes a bit too much heat and needs to get out of a situation. You can also use those walls to trap people. He's got really consistent good damage with his projectiles, and he's just super solid. He makes a lot of space, gets a lot of kills, very hard to 1v1, so he goes in A. Now we have Torvald, one of the best off-tanks in the game. Maybe you could argue the second best off-tank in the game. Which I guess, you know, why did I put him below Atlas then? I don't know. Listen, you could put him above Atlas, sure. Torvald is, yeah, so strong. And he just got another nerf too, but he's still kicking as one of the best off-tanks in the game. Let me break it down for you. I have a video on him, by the way. Link in the description. You know I've got like 15 videos down there. But yeah, Torvald has a really good ability to pocket people, obviously. He just pops a 600 health shield on them in an instant, and they're able to take a lot more damage based off that, right? Even if the enemies have Wrecker, that's still one extra shot or a few extra shots of damage that they have to do to break through that shield and get to their raw health pool again. And with the Life Giver card, plus the card that gives him reset on elims, I forget the name right now, with that combo, he can actually get a lot of free cooldown reset on all of his abilities just by pocketing his teammates and having them get kills for him. So that's really, really powerful cooldown reset. His Nullify is amazing for basically two reasons. It's really good anti-dive because it's auto-aim. You can just slap that on a flank who comes near you and they're screwed. Or you can use it offensively to secure a kill, especially if you're playing around your flank, which you should be. Just do it. That's how you play Torvald. So the combination of that, right, the Nullify plus the protection, makes him really good at pocketing his teammates and helping them get kills, and also pocketing anyone who's getting dived and making sure that they don't die. Really, really valuable. And when you're not pocketing people with Torvald, you're still really powerful because Torvald has one of the best weapons in the tank class. 800 damage per second, no self-slow, pinpoint accurate, good range. That's amazing. What more could you ask for? And Torvald is also one of the most self-sufficient tanks in the game because he's got a lot of combined HP between his raw health and his shield, especially if you run the health card. And then, at the press of a button, over 1 second, you regenerate over 2,000 shield health back. And even if the enemies have Wrecker, that's still a lot of extra self-sustain that you have that is independent of Cauterize. They are forced to buy Wrecker for you. So that's also a bit of hidden value with Torvald. You're forcing the enemies to buy Wrecker, even if you're the only shield tank on the team. That means they can't buy Haven as quickly, or Nimble, or Master Riding, or whatever item they would have bought instead, right? And if you're especially menacing, they also need resale for you, for that Nullify and for that ultimate. You force a lot of items out of the enemies, thus nixing their ability to buy the stuff that they really wanted to buy, Chronos, etc., right? So that's even more value. And his ultimate is a good disruptor ultimate too. It can also be a good anti-dive tool. It can counter enemy ultimates. There's no understating how good Torvald is right now. Easy A tier. Maybe even arguably low S tier. He is so strong. Then we get to Atlas. Really good tank. His wall is insane. It blocks infinite amounts of damage, and if you go for the small wall, it does that for a long amount of time. You can have really good uptime. If you go for the big wall, you cut the map in half. That gives so much space for your team. On top of that, his own self-sustain is really good. He basically has 2 lives in the form of his own self-rewind, second chance. And then he also has the ability to rewind enemies, which counters a lot of stuff. Specifically can counter healing, right? Because if someone gets a big burst of healing, you can rewind them, instantly nix that, then hit a follow-up shot, and you kill them. So that's also really good. He is one of the most skill-dependent tanks in the game, though, obviously. He is super skill-dependent, so only the best of the best can play him to a high standard. But there's no denying how much value he gets when you're actually really good at Atlas. So definitely a tank worth learning, and he is still super strong. And then finally we have Barrick. Barrick is, oh my gosh, he is really good in terms of point tank pressure right now. Barrick does a lot of damage with Tinkerin. a lot of really consistent good range damage. And he's just a little guy with a lot of emplacements that make him pretty tough to take down. The turrets can take damage for him, the shield can take damage for him. You need both Wrecker and Bulldozer if you really want to counter him, although Bulldozer is a lot more optional, obviously. And his ultimate also is really good at providing a lot of space and cover for his team. He's generally really dependable, and with the shift of Inara going down and Nyx going down, I think he's probably the best point tank in the game now, or at least one of them. So Barrack doing really good as well. I probably should have put Torvald above Barrack too. I think I should have... editing magic will put Torvald above Barrack. There. I did an oopsie proofreading the thing, and I could just redo it and redo the script, or redo the commentary and just like switch that around, but that'll take too much time, and I don't want to redo that again. I've already got a bunch of videos to edit, so we're just gonna... editing magic, Torvald goes above Barrack. There you go, I did it. Yay! Alright, now we get to move on to the flank class. There's a ton of flanks up here too. Buck, Koga, Eevee, Lex, and Skye. Oh boy. So Buck has one of the highest win rates in the flank class now, and I could probably put him higher just for that. However, Buck is pretty situational. Usually where you see Buck in today's meta is with a Torvald pocket or a Corvus pocket, and against very little anti-dive. But in those situations, oh dear God, he's disgusting. He's filthy. He's putrid. He is so busted. He is really a one-note character. He's all in on the dive. And if you allow him to dive, he's S tier, no questions asked. But if you shut him down, he's kind of trash. He's like a... he's like a better version of Drogo's in that sense, where, you know, he's either really good or really bad. But when he's really good, he's going to carry the frickin' game. So, yeah, Buck goes in A tier. And then we have Koga. Controller. Aim assist. Yes. He's one of the best champions to use aim assist with, in my opinion, because he has no recoil and very little spread. Very easy to control, and you can just nail people with headshots. But what puts him a cut above some of the others is the fact that he has those dashes, which makes him completely crowd control immune, damage immune, cauterize immune. You can heal him back up inside of it. They're amazing. Really good for dodging. And so combine that with his good damage output, he is a really strong flank right now. One of the contenders for, you know, one of the best flanks in the game, especially if you're playing on controller. Next up we have Eevee, my beloved. Eevee is really good, especially against controller players, if you're good at her. And she is obviously, you know, as many people know, the most skillful flank in the game. So she does take a lot of work to make her good. But when you are really freaking good at her, she's really freaking good. Her strength scales pretty proportionally and directly with the amount of skill you have. If you're trash with Eevee, oh my god, she's D tier trash, never play her. Never play her in ranked if you're that bad. But if you're good at her, if you're an Eevee main, like myself, she's really freaking strong. And there's only one other flank on keyboard and mouse who can really do better than her, as you'll see in the S tier. Maybe technically two right now because of some buffs, but you know, you get the point. She's really good. And then after Eevee, we have Lex. I just made a video about Lex, talking about why heroism is suddenly picked all of a sudden. And yeah, heroism is really good. You get 90% damage reduction, crowd control immunity, and then you combine that with the fact that he has wall hacks, aim hacks, and an AoE execute, and high burst. Oh my god, and he's really good on controller. Easily one of the best flanks in the game on controller, and he's only outmatched right now, technically, by Skye, who has the highest win rate, I think, in the game at high elo. Look at that win rate. Why is it so high? She just got nerfed, and I think it went up. Huh? How? I don't get it, man. I don't get it. It feels wrong for me. It still feels wrong for me as a veteran of this game who has seen Skye be bad for years. But, I mean, the truth is, she has percent-based damage, she has a really, really good weapon to use with aim assist, and with 2 smoke bombs and her movement speed passive now, she is moving really, really fast while stealth and healing up really consistently with the Healing Vapors card, and she plays really well around the strong off-tanks right now, who also don't necessarily have that much mobility. You know, they can keep up with her, and they can synergize with her and her high DPS output and just make stuff happen. So, yeah. I still feel like the win rate with her is a bit ridiculously high, though. I don't quite understand that, but I'm just gonna put her up there anyways. She's good, no doubt about that. Anyways, now let's move on to the only two DPS and A+, those being Octavia and here he is, it's Shaolin. So Octavia, again, controller pick, very good hit scan pressure, and she is actually a little bit better this patch despite her damage going down, because she is so much more consistent. She is full auto now, and her unscoped shots actually became a lot more viable, but her scoped shots are still now a lot easier to take advantage of, regardless of your input type. And when you're taking advantage of those scoped shots, consistently putting people in that Goldilocks zone where you just shred them, she does insane amounts of damage, and the distortion field is also really good for causing chaos in the match. So combine that plus her passive where she gives all of her teammates just an inherent bonus, she is a really good DPS. And then we move on to Shaolin, who his sole existence is to counter every single good flank in the game, and by golly, he does an amazing job at it. He is so good against flanks with that sand trap. Just hit him with that 1300 burst and that cripple, and then rapid shot them to death, or charge up another arrow, whatever your preference is. Oh man, it's amazing. And he got some recent buffs a few updates ago, where he got a massive health buff, so he can now have 2400 health if you run the health card, making him one of the tankiest DPS in the game. And that further helps to make him an excellent anti-flank, but it also makes him less susceptible to dive from off-tanks, right? Which is part of why Leon is in C tier, because she does not have the same brawn. And also Rapid Shot, I would say, does a bit better of a job of combating those off-tanks than what Leon has in her arsenal. So in general, Shaolin is really good right now. Even though his ultimate does kind of get countered by reveals, it's still a miniature Furia ult, if you think about it. It gives him a 30% draw speed increase and movement speed increase, which is just a raw buff to his DPS and his movement speed. If you just pretend like you're not invisible when you're getting revealed and just play a bit more safe, it's still a massive buff to his damage output, and it is pretty nice, honestly, a bit underrated. Shaolin is generally one of the best DPS right now in the game if you can play him, right? There is that skill requirement, and there's also the issue of the frame drops, which does hold him back from being truly S tier. But he is still really good right now if you can play him, because he deletes flanks, man. And, well, if flanks are really strong, whatever counters flanks is also going to be really strong. So that's why Shaolin is at the top of A tier when it comes to the damage champions. And now, 50 minutes into the recording. I don't know how much of this I'm going to have to cut out, but yeah, we've made it a long way, haven't we? We have finally reached the S tier. In S tier, we have a few champions, most of whom are actually the best damage champions. There's a lot of variety in terms of how strong certain damage champions are. They're either really strong or really weak or somewhere in between. But yeah, I guess let's just start off with the support class. We have two supports up here. We have Ying and we have Grover. Ying is, I think, the most banned support right now, because she got ridiculous buffs in the Valor's End update. She is so strong now. Ying mains have been eaten good this entire patch. It'll probably come to an end in the next patch, but in the meantime, Ying is putting out the most healing out of any healer in the game, just period. She is the heal bot, and her healing is just straight up overwhelming. If you have illusions and life exchange and the ultimate all on you at the same time, you will not die, as long as you have rejuvenate and late game cauterize. Like, it is actually absurd how much healing she is able to do. On top of that, she is reasonably survivable. With her teleport and her illusions, she can body block damage, and she can try and play unpredictably to get out of sticky situations, which is definitely a good tool. And she has pretty decent damage as well. She doesn't have a channeled heal. While she does still spend a lot of time looking for teammates to heal with her life exchange, she can still be shooting out damage the entire match, and that puts consistent pressure on the enemies. Or you could do damage Ying instead of healer Ying. Play her with a second support, like Ray, and then all of a sudden, you have one of the best damage weapons in the support class, where she can put out really consistent, powerful damage, especially if you have aim assist, because guess what? It's hit scan. And then you're playing a really good damage champion with those illusions that can still put out pretty decent healing throughout the match now. Still not enough to solo heal, by the way. Make that clear. But still pretty consistent healing throughout the match that can supplement whatever your other healer is doing. And then her ultimate now just straight up ignores a portion of cauterize, meaning that her ultimate is really good now in late game, and it just keeps people alive so well. And again, if you pair that with Ray, you've got that extra ult gen. You can just spam ults like crazy while doing insane amounts of damage. She is insane right now. There's a reason why she's banned and picked so much. So Ying, easy S tier. And then the other easy S tier for me is Grover. Grover got another nerf this patch, but Grover is he's still Grover, man. He's insane. So Grover has the best area healing in the game in terms of its consistency and its burst, right? And he can also heal through walls. It's a huge radius. It's just amazing. And he also has the best self-sustain in the game, because all of the healing he does to his allies, he also receives himself, making him very hard to kill, especially in tandem with Vine Tech, which allows him to basically teleport across the map with one Vine. Like, it's ridiculous how far he can go. On top of that, because he doesn't have a channeled heal apart from his ultimate, he can do consistent damage throughout the entire match, basically constantly doing 300, 400, 500 damage, no matter what. And that damage really adds up. It's a lot of extra pressure on the enemies, and he also has a burst combo with his crippling throw, where he does an axe, cripple throw, axe. That's a lot of burst, and it also cripples the enemy, making it, a good anti-flank tool, or really just good versus anyone who has, mobility. On top of that, the crippling throw gives him really good reset on both his Vine and his Blossom, allowing him to spam stuff like crazy, and because it's active reset instead of passive cooldown reduction, it scales really well with Chronos because it doesn't incur diminishing returns with that, meaning he can get insane cooldown reduction, and then he also has really good uptime on his ultimate, because you can cancel his ultimate early after you've healed your teammates up to full health, and still retain a large percentage of the ult charge. Then, because he's constantly doing so much healing and damage throughout the match, he builds it back up really quickly, and that compounds further with morale boost. So he has some of the best survivability in the support class, if not the best survivability in the support class, some of the best, most consistent burst AoE healing in the game, really good consistent damage pressure, a cripple. He's insane. He is so good, just due to the very nature of how Grover works. Sure, they can kick him out of the meta if they nerf his numbers, or, take keywords away and don't adjust the Blossom back up. That might be enough to take him down to maybe A or B tier. But as it stands, oh my god. He is amazing. He's absolutely amazing, and yeah, definitely my choice for the best support in the game. Some people would probably argue Ying this patch, but Grover's still my man. I still think he's the best, and so he goes into S tier for me. Next up, we only have one tank in the S tier, and that's because, honestly, most tanks these days are decently playable. But there is one off tank who's just a cut above the rest, and that is Khan. I've also made a video, hey, talking about why Khan is really good, so go watch that if you want a super detailed explanation. But the long and short of it is, he has the highest single target DPS in the tank class, he has really good survivability with his shield and his battle shout, he has consistent self-sustain even in late game because he can use his shield to cleanse cauterize and then battle shout for the full 1300 burst, which also affects allies, by the way, and he has one of the best ultimates in the game because it's basically just a free kill every time, and it also has really good ultimate charge rate. He can charge it up really, really quickly because of that DPS, because of that healing, and because he can buy morale boost and make it even crazier. So Khan is just insanely valuable. He is so good at getting kills, so good at pushing up with his flank and making stuff happen that he's just a cut above the rest, and so he goes into S tier. There's a reason why he is the most picked tank right now. He's just that good. So Khan, easy S tier. Now we get to move on to the flanks. Again, flanks are all very pickable. Most flanks in this game are actually really good. So, just because, Lex, Eevee, and Skye, etc. aren't in S tier doesn't mean they aren't also really good. But there's no denying how good these two flanks are right now up here in S tier. Caspian got insane buffs in the Valor's End update. He got a buff that we were all asking for, which was the buff to his movement ability, where it now carries momentum. That's great. But then on top of that, Evil Mojo decided to double his damage output. Or at least that's what it feels like, because they basically buffed the ammo efficiency of his pistol and of measured cadence. So he now basically never has to reload and can constantly pump out so much damage throughout the match, because he can now proc measured cadence equally as much on his sword. And then on top of that, they also decided, why the heck not? Let's give him a fire rate buff. And so now his stacks give him 3% fire rate buff instead of 2% fire rate buff, which is absurd. He does so much damage right now, and his ultimate deletes people. You can get kills so quickly with it. It's absurd. So, yeah, combine that with the movement speed buff that he got this patch, or the movement ability buff that he got this patch, excuse me. Caspian is one of the best flanks in the game right now. He's a glass cannon, yeah, he's still pretty squishy, but that doesn't matter if he one-taps you. He hits that stun, and you die before you can recover, even if you have resilience. Oh, man. They definitely need to tone back the damage buffs. Their heart was in the right place with buffing Caspian and with giving him that movement ability buff, but they took it way too far with the damage. So Caspian for now stays in S tier, though I imagine next patch this will likely change and he'll probably go back down to A, maybe B. And then we have Vatu, who has been in S tier for the longest time. They just kind of forgot to nerf him, I guess. I don't know. Like, Vatu is easily the best flank in the game on keyboard and mouse. Obviously, he's not that great of a controller pick, but on keyboard and mouse, he just does so much. He has a really amazing burst combo, and I truly mean amazing. It's fantastic. It deletes people almost as quickly as Caspian can. And he also has basically the second best mobility in the game after 7, but his mobility is a lot better than 7's in the sense that it allows him to dodge much more flexibly throughout a fight. 7 wins easily on traversal, beats any flank any day on traversal, but Vatu can use his movement tactically in a battle to stay alive and dodge attacks while still being able to attack the enemies, and that is really powerful. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he has some of the best damage reduction in the game. He has very consistent damage reduction because he basically gets it from every ability he has. He has 2 cards, one of which gives him damage reduction after using ambush, and the other of which gives him damage reduction after using shadow bombs. Both of them scale to over 20%, which is really amazing. And then he also gets damage reduction while using his dash. So if you manage to track him and actually hit him while he's dashing, guess what? You get rewarded with less damage. I know, it's stupid. And then on top of all that, he has a really good ult that just locks down kills so easily. It's a stun, he passes through people, does 800 damage, and it combos with his kunai, and he can kill people so quickly with that. And it also has really good uptime. So Vatu in general, if you can actually play him well, is the best flank in the game in terms of how much you're able to do with this guy. But don't get it twisted. There is that skill requirement. You're not going to pick Vatu up and instantly do good with him, right? You still got to build up that skill. It's more so, once you actually get good at him, he is just the best. Straight up, bar none. So Vatu, S tier. For how many months in a row now? Oh, man. Anyways, let's talk about DPS now. We've got Tyra, Bomb King, and Omen as our S tier DPS. Tyra is in S tier for basically one reason, and that's Hunting Party. Hunting Party allows her to reveal 2 enemies on the enemy team instead of just 1, and the damage bonus applies to her teammates as well as her. So yeah, you know all these busted champions? Caspian with his damage, Vatu with his burst combo, Skye with her percent damage, Omen, oh man, they all just do 15% more damage. Even if Tyra's not the one directly popping off, she is still providing immense value for her team just by using that. But aside from that, she still does have a pretty decent kit. Yeah, she has no mobility, but she is the tankiest DPS in the game with the highest base health pool, and cards that can increase it even further. She also has inherent lifesteal, and her rifle generally does really good consistent single target damage. It's good on controller because it's a hit scan. And then she also has, you know, the ability to compound that damage with the damage from her fire, and easily melt a tank. Alternatively, she has her grenade for a bit of burst against a flank, which is much more, I guess, dynamic than Victor's grenade because he don't have to charge it up. You can just lob that out of flank instantly and kill them without really any forethought. So she's still a really, really, really good damage champion. Good on both input types just due to the nature of Hunting Party, but even better on controller. And so Tyra is an easy S tier. Then we have my boy Bomb King, who is amazing. He has, I think, now probably not the best mobility in the damage class, because I guess Drogo's exist. He has really good I've been talking for too long. He has really good mobility with Royal Subjects, especially if you run it with the card Backdraft, which gives him insane cooldown reduction on his Poppy Bomb. And so with that, he's able to dive the enemies, but also get out of sticky situations very easily. And he's unique because he's, I think, the only damage champion in the game who has a movement ability that cannot be crippled. If you cripple Bomb King, he doesn't care. He will pop you away anyways, meaning stuff like Eevee's ultimate is completely useless against him. Bomb King also has really good, consistent damage. He has his sticky bombs, which have a fast fire rate for a bomb, and they also still do 850 damage, meaning you can absolutely melt through a target, no matter who they are, really. He just does really good damage. He can spam up bombs like crazy. His Grumpy Bomb is a really good tool for zoning, right? You can throw it on the objective and force out defensive abilities from the enemies to not get stunned, or just force them to leave the area. And if they do get hit by the stun, you can easily kill them. They are very, very punished if they get hit by the Grumpy Bum. On top of that, and this isn't intended, but Grumpy Bum is just really buggy. And so the animation will sometimes play out, you'll think the bomb explodes, and so you walk back into the area, and then a second later you get stunned, because there's like this weird desync going on. And that definitely needs to be looked into and fixed, but it does make Grumpy Bum unintentionally stronger than it should be, so that is something to keep in mind. And then also his ultimate is great. It does a lot of damage, it stuns them in place, and after the stun, if they don't die, you can easily follow up and kill them with the bombs. So yeah, and you can combine that with the Poppy Bomb and get the drop on people very easily. He's also pretty tanky. Good health card, good sustain. He's got the movement speed card that stacks up and gives him really good movement speed. He's generally just really strong. Even though he is actually pretty susceptible to hit scans, he still does good against them because he's just that great. He's just the king of the bombs, man. What more is there to say? So Bomb King is the second DPS in S tier. And then the third DPS into S tier, the newest champion on this list, is Omen. Oh, man. They really did add him into ranked without changing the more card. Oh, boy. Let me take a sip of my water and then explain to you why this combination of More and Umbral Lance is busted. Ah, my throat is dying. So, Omen does insane amounts of damage with the More card and with Umbral Lance. Umbral Lance is the talent that makes it so instead of a shotgun, he has a pinpoint accurate rifle, kind of similar to Binary Star Genos. And by itself, the damage isn't necessarily overwhelming, although he does have a lot more ammo, meaning it's pretty consistent. But when you run the More card, especially at like level 3 or level 4, you get ridiculous amounts of bursts. You are 3-tapping or 4-tapping people. And this burst is really consistent because it has such great range, right? He has fall off, I think, equivalent to someone like Leon, but with far greater burst. And so if your aim is good, you will delete people. On top of that, even though, you know, with the More card, you do have to reload a lot, that doesn't hurt him as much because, A, Deft Hands exists, but B, he also has really good reload animation cancels, where you can basically reload, then throw out an ability like his Void, and you will use an ability, still be effective, you know, reposition or do damage or whatever, and you'll also have reloaded your gun so you can continue blasting, which is really nice. Speaking of the Void just does consistent free damage. You can throw it on the point, put some pressure on people, it damages through shields, which is really nice. And it also slows people if they have the brand on them. He can also Void Grip somebody, which is really powerful for a damage champion, right? It's a really powerful tool for him to have. He can throw people off the map, he can reposition them into positions that they don't want to be in, and of course he can throw them into his ultimate, which does the most damage out of any ability in the game. The ultimate is, though, a bit lackluster because it's very hard to utilize properly. Most of the time it's just a zoning tool, but theoretically, this ability is insane because you can hook people into it, you can Sarah's ult people into it, you can use all forms of displacement, Khan ult, Ashe knockback, whatever you want, to get someone stuck in the Omen ult. And if they get stuck in the ult for even just a second, they die. Straight up, they just die. So, yeah, he is a damage dealing machine. He is a menace. Just a base kit with his base shotgun and no more? He's alright. But with that combo of Umbral Lance plus more, oof, man, it's not okay. It's not okay. Especially when you pair him with some of the other strong characters in the game, like Khan, like Caspian, like Torvald, and then you heal him up with a Grover or Ying. Oh, no. Oof. It's ridiculous. So yeah, that is going to do it for today's tier list. Let me know your thoughts, of course, in the comments section down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Am I stupid? Go ahead and dislike the video if I'm stupid. I know I'm going to have a lot of those anyways, because that's always how tier lists go. But I make them anyways, because you guys still watch them, you guys still like them, and so yeah, I will keep making them. But yeah, I am going to be coming off a vacation tomorrow. This is the last video I have pre-prepared as I am on my vacation, and I'm probably, as you watch this video, working on tomorrow's video. So that's pretty cool, right? And as it stands for me recording this video right now before I go on my vacation, I'm tired. I've been recording for well over 3 hours, and I'm gonna have some water, I'm gonna get some dinner, and then I'm gonna go into an editing frenzy. So yeah, that's gonna be nice. But yeah, if you guys have enjoyed, again, like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications, support me through the memberships program down below. You can click join and support this channel for a very cheap amount of money. Literally, I think less than some coffees are priced. And yeah, you can get some stuff back in return. So yeah, with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.